It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Ha! It's Feedback Friday. Gonna have to do this one short again. Busy times, busy times. Um, this is one of these things where I wish that YouTube didn't punish multi-purpose channels because doing YouTube streams, I've been warned, tanks your algorithm. But I would love some sort of super chat feature for things like the Batman video because a lot of really good comments got lost in a lot of emotionally reactive comments, which I expected. I mean, make a video about how Batman makes you an asshole without expecting a lot of assholes to jump on you defending the honor of Batman. Um, and yeah. So I don't know what to do about it other than if you like this sort of content and you like me bothering to address feedback and reward positive feedback, not critical feedback, just high quality feedback. Help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it, coffee.com/Leanna K. Okay, so I'm gonna do two Batman comments. And then I'm gonna move on to the Monkey Island stuff. Then I've got Wellness Wednesday, one Wellness Wednesday comment. One was the type of comment I expected. The other was a more interesting, more thought out, tangential comment. And I want to be clear, I don't mind tangents and I don't mind criticism, even criticism that I dunk on sometimes, as long as it appears that someone has watched the video. There were a lot of comments the last couple weeks that were clearly just responding to the title of the video and very clearly did not watch the video because I brought things up in the video that would have sort of explained certain things to people. And some of the knee-jerk comments came in so quickly there wasn't even time. And yes, I am wearing my Dr. Doom shirt today, if you've been seeing my t-shirt follies over the week on Twitter. Okay, so like I said, some spicy comments were expected, but you come at me. Here we go. Like I said, this is just one example. I thought this was sort of an example of the stuff that was emotionally reactive, not thought out, and this is how Batman makes you an asshole. Okay, it makes you sound like an asshole, certainly. I don't know what it is about Batman that Batman fans feel the need to defend the honor of Batman. One of the mistakes I made in this video was that I did not realize that the goddamn Batman was not as well known a reference as I thought it was. That was, of course, a reference to Frank Miller. I believe it was a Dark Knight 2, but sort of the low point of Batman writing that encapsulates all the other problems with it. But yeah, so I was too nerdy there. Fair enough, it happens sometimes. But this is why when you come at me on a fact check, you better be right. 4 minutes in, and I can already tell this is a matter of perspective. What you see as pessimistic, I see as realistic. He doesn't, Batman, see the bad in people. Very much the opposite. Bruce is always trying to find the good in people, specifically as villains. It's one of the reasons he won't kill Joker, not because of his no-kill rule, but he thinks they can be helped somehow. Bruce doesn't live in a world of what ifs, but what is. Also, never let anyone in. Leanna, WTF is the Bat family. WTF is Alfred and Robin that have existed since his creation. Are you even listening to yourself? By the way, that wasn't drugs Batman injected with. It's venom, not drugs. The same stuff Bane has coursing through him. Venom is a form of super steroid. Venom is drugs. Also, fun fact, no, Batman, Alfred, and Robin were not created together. Robin was created a year later, more than a year later. Batman was created in like March, I think, 1939. Robin didn't appear until Detective Comics 38, which was in 1940. Alfred didn't appear until Batman number 16 in 1943. So it's a common misconception, but it's not true that Robin and Alfred were there from the beginning. They were uh they were later add-ons. I mean, yeah, that's pretty early in the character's run, so honest mistake. It seems like Robin and Alfred have been around the whole time, but they actually weren't. It's important when you're saying, what are you on? Are you even listening to yourself? And I dealt with the whole Bat family thing. I dealt with the fact that, yeah, they're around, and Batman is always shoving them away emotionally. I knew this was going to be a doozy of a comment when I can already tell it's a matter of perspective. It was actually 2 A's, but I cleaned it up. Yes, that's the whole point of commentary videos. It's a perspective. It would probably benefit you, commenter, to take time and see the positive parts of a perspective different from your own before you go off knee-jerking, proving how Batman makes you an asshole. And then somebody else actually accused me of having a pro-Superman bias because I have Superman in my background talking about Batman. There's a very obvious Batman Beyond and Catwoman in my background. Right above the Toy Story alien. It might be a little hard to see, but that's Batman behind Wonder Woman in that Alex Ross print. Batman Beyond. I do not understand what specifically about Batman makes fanboys need to defend the honor of Batman, like, vociferously. I will speculate with the next question. So thank you, commenter, for letting me dunk on you. I figure you can handle it based on your Peppy the Frog clown icon. The next thing comment was, I'd be quite interested in how the modern day Joker has cultivated a generation of neckbeards and incels that makes interesting comics unpalatable for regular people. I actually don't think it's the Joker that's done that. I actually think it's the lack of maturity in overall comic book writing. Comic book writing has gotten, it's like it overshoots profound and ends up derivative. And there's some stuff, obviously, that hits better than others. But one of my big complaints, and why I tend to call out Batman a lot, is I think that if you're targeting a readership of young single men, primarily, not entirely, you gotta go not all these days, but let's face it, the primary reader base is still young single men for comic books. You have the opportunity to embody pro-social skills in the characters, a little bit of wisdom. Batman, Wolverine, these guys can be flawed. They're deliberately flawed. They're intended to be flawed, right? But the problem is I don't see people seeing Batman's flaws as flaws, because these are the things that they defend. No, Batman's incredibly pessimistic. I gave plenty of reasons for that. The Joker's a villain. And okay, yes, they made a movie about the Joker and he's the protagonist in that movie, but nobody wants to be Joaquin Phoenix's character in that movie. I mean, it was DC Does Taxi Driver, and it was a great film. I thought it did a really, really good job. But just because something is depicted on film doesn't mean it's glorified. Um, I think that, and you guys know I don't like the term neckbeard or incel or anything like that. That was the comments where it's not mine. But, I dealt on It's Not Therapy this week, link in the description box if you want to listen to it, subscribe on podcast, about, among other things, the loneliness epidemic in men. Everything's algorithm driven, this, that, and the next thing. Let's face it, there's a certain type of guy that dating apps do really, really well for. Everybody else, um, people got to meet you and get to know you before they see the value in you. And I I really think, and this is something I'm struggling to figure out how to address, because I don't like just to complain about things. I like to be part of the solution. And yes, I did multiple times apply to write DC Comics. They said nothing every time. One time Dan Didio said, write your own comic to me at a comic at San Diego Comic-Con. Yes, he's not around anymore. And so I actually asked a few creators at DC, can I actually apply? And they said, no, I don't know what he's saying. We're not taking any external pitches right now. But one of the things I'd like to do is actually use these characters to be examples of how to treat people, be examples of how to talk to people, not in the ridiculous, not realistic, the whole, what you see as pessimistic, I see as realistic. No, no. Comics aren't realistic, certainly not in the emotional depictions. And part of that is because the guys, and it's mostly guys, writing these heroes have no idea what heroism actually is. And so it's creating this really false veneer of comics that ends up just being very little to stick to, with notable exceptions. Superman Red and Blue was one I really enjoyed. I still miss the Super Sons. Some of the more Silver Agey Batman stuff is cool, but I still think there's something to be done with Batman that could address his trauma, address how that trauma affects him without just making him an asshole. You would think, since Bruce Wayne is the world's greatest detective, he would recognize he's got a problem and seek help and overcome his trauma, let his trauma inform him and drive him, but not control him. And they don't show that. And they flirt at it, and then they step away from it. And they flirt at it because kill the Justice League and, Dark Crisis and Final Crisis and Midnight Crisis and Infinite Crisis, and DC Comics has more crises than 13-year-old girls, right? Big problem is DC readers have stopped having those sorts of crises, and DC's still having them. The reason I think comics are unpalatable these days for regular people is they are really interested in making a point a lot of the time, and that's not a problem in and of itself. Alan Moore was trying to make a point, right? Frank Miller was trying to make a point with The Dark Knight. Alan Moore, bleh. Alan Moore was trying to make a point with Watchmen. Frank Miller was trying to make a point with Dark Knight. It's totally fine to make points in your writing, but there's gotta be a wisdom to the points. I mean, George Orwell was making points, and, a lot of dystopian fiction is there to make points. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll, making points. But one, the quality of writing was just much, much better. But also, there was actually some wisdom to the points. And when people, the problem is that comics for so long cultivated not just young lonely men, a particular type of young lonely men, and then they suddenly changed it. They took the wheel and yanked it all the way the other way, and of course they got upset. Of course they did. I don't know why people blame them for a problem they didn't create. I think just because they're kind of a nuisance on the internet right now. But again, not their fault. They were trained with a particular expectation, and then all of a sudden the board was reset. Um, and that's not specific to that, you know, Snyder Bros or Fandom Menace or any of these type of things. Look at Supernatural fandom. Look at Steven Universe fandom. Look at Rick and Morty fandom. Look at what's the other? Well, the Supergirl fandom went bonkers last year. Accused the showrunners of queer baiting Lana and Kara. I'm like, I watched that show. They were friends. Kara's as straight as an arrow. Her sister, okay, different story, but what? When a company encourages a fan base to obsess, you've got to be very, very careful about expectations. People hinge their entire happiness. They get really invested. And with social media, that the companies are actively encouraging them to get that invested, even if it's not healthy. And that's why I think it would be better if these books actually taught healthy social skills. Maybe I should get back into writing comics again. I don't know, but I don't think it's just the Joker, because like I said, the Joker is the villain. People recognize in comics villains are bad guys, and villains ultimately lose. There's a lot more going on. So thanks for your comment. Moving on to Monkey Island. Similar thing. You know, it's not just comics. A lot of people mentioned the Wind Waker vitriol. The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker game. You know, before anybody played it or knew what it was about, everybody freaked out, and people are making comparisons with the look of the game. People didn't like the look of the game, but it was in the midst of the X-Pro era, where games were supposed to become mature, and so a game series getting more cartoony, not less, led to loads of childish temper tantrums from exquisitely mature dude bros, right? They pointed out that Paper Mario got hate. But of course, everything changed, and another commenter pointed this out. The intensity really ratcheted up with the whole retake Mass Effect thing. The legitimately not great ending of Mass Effect 3. Now I'll spare you my opinions on Mass Effect as a whole, but that was when the games press started calling the fan base entitled for being sincerely upset at something that just, in that case, you gotta stick the landing on an ending to a trilogy like that. Most games don't. I will say that, you know, the God of War trilogy was maybe the only one that I can think of off the top of my head, you know, massive, epic ending that said something. Halo 3 wasn't great. I mean, Halo's still going, but you know what I mean? That original trilogy of Bungie games, and Gears 3 was pretty good. But yeah, it's hard to stick the landing on these massive franchises. But people felt legitimately ripped off, not because of the what was there so much as what was not there. They didn't get resolutions to the various supporting character stories, and then I believe they corrected that in the Leviathan DLC. But it became this war between the press and the fans. And I think that's what's fueling a lot of that stuff. Now, that being said, I agree with I come down with the commenters and said I really can't understand making a pass on a game due to the art style. This implies that you view the art as the main quality of the game, or at least as it's so important that it defines the game. And I thought that was interesting because yeah, it's a game, right? But it seems like everything now, there's no amoral act. I talk about this a lot, I know, ad nauseum. but the fact that everything has to be moral or immoral now. There's no amoral action. Everything has to be some conspiracy. And if we go back to the Stoics had three categories. There were moral actions, there were immoral actions, but then the vast majority of decisions that people made were just amoral actions. There were no moral charge to it at all. Sometimes developers announce they're making a point with an art style change. Mortal Kombat 11, right? Other times there are just, that's what they liked. That's what they wanted the game to look like. One person pointed out that a lot of it's like in storybook form, told in flashbacks, so that stylized art made sense to them. Still, a lot of the negativity in the comments of that video missed the point of the video, which was we have to find a happy medium between not liking something and sorry, I'm late for a meeting. I'm just going to finish up. Between not liking something and being an asshole about it. And within the first hour of that video being out, somebody called Ron Gilbert lazy. Even though I said all the time in that video, nobody goes out to make crap. Lazy game devs don't last. A guy who's been in the business this long, not lazy. Could be emotionally stunted, could have psychological problems, could procrastinate, but not lazy. Making games are hard. Come on. Focus on the actual thing you don't like. Don't extrapolate into guesses about a person's motivations. You don't know that unless there's some direct statement from the developer. Come on. And that moves into the idea of needing to be negative. That was Wellness Wednesday. And this is the comment, and this is what I'll close on. I'm not sure that the same people who are generally negative throughout their lives are the same people who tend to become disproportionately negative at trivial things. The former seems like it's caused by a nihilistic or depressed philosophy, while the latter seems like it would be a coping strategy in response to toxic power dynamics in other parts of the individual's life. It doesn't make sense to me that a person who thinks everything sucks would get particularly upset about a game being delayed. Add it to the pile would be the response I'd expect. On the other hand, the old stereotype of the man who beats his wife because he couldn't talk back to his boss at work seems like it would align more with the type of person who believed that threats of violence are an appropriate response to a game being delayed. And that explains something to me that I was like coming at it from, you guys complain about everything. So why are you surprised or disappointed again? What this commenter points out, and I know this theory, but it's transference. That you can't get mad at one person, so you get mad at another person. People are taking other parts of their lives out on internet content creators, game devs, anybody that you can access to yell at and you're allowed to yell at. But when did we get to the point that you're allowed to yell at someone because you don't like a piece of entertainment they created? I want everybody to think about that. It's not that you don't have the right to not like stuff. It's not even that you don't have the right to not like people. But you are in control of what you do with that dislike. You are responsible for how you express your anger, frustration, and disappointment. This is not a Supreme Court decision, right? This is not earth-shattering stuff. This is a game. Wait a month. Another one will come along. Go back to your stack of shame. If you're constantly blowing up about stuff like this, uncontrolled raging in comment sections, you deserve better out of life. Because it's one thing to go, there are plenty of people who, say, I didn't care. As I talked about in the Monkey Island video, I didn't care for the art style. They didn't freak out, There were plenty of people who, and the thing that concerns me is there are plenty of people with legitimate criticisms whose legitimate criticisms, calmly worded, are getting lost in these explosions. So nobody's benefiting. Everything's a race to the bottom. And that is doom. See what I did there? All right, I just like my shirt. Okay, everybody, have a great weekend. Help support this channel. If you like this sort of dialogue, help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/Leanna K. Thanks for watching. And again, have a great weekend. And thanks for your feedback.